Parashat Kedoshim commences with the bold and simple yet challenging instruction, Kedoshim tihiyu, you shall be holy. Now, normally when we think of holiness, we might be tempted to think that holiness is achieved through a life of abstinence and restraint, through cutting oneself off from society, dedicating oneself to a life of prayer and study. But if we thought that, we'd be wrong. Because after the words Kedoshim tihiyu, we get a long list of varied commands, which do not require us to cut ourselves off from society. On the contrary, they require us to engage with society. There are laws such as honouring one's parents, not withholding workers' wages that are owed to one's employee, leaving a corner of the field for the poor to gather. There are also rules that we might call religious, like keeping Shabbat and various laws relating to sacrifices. Indeed, there are so many disparate and varied subjects in this chapter that it looks like it's sorely in need of an editor. But in fact, this section is not a mess, it's a message. And the message is that if we want to achieve holiness in the world, we do not have to make a separation between the physical world and the spiritual world. On the contrary, we achieve holiness by living in the physical world and sanctifying it. And sanctifying it by living a life according to those commandments, according to the halachot, the rules which the Torah prescribes. So when we leave a corner of the field, when we speak the truth, when we give people good advice and avoid giving them bad advice, even if it's to our benefit, we are bringing holiness into the world. And we can go further. Because in the middle of this chapter comes a command which is perhaps amongst the very hardest to achieve. Don't take revenge. If somebody else wrongs you, we can't pay them back in any possible way. But even harder than that is the command, when someone else wrongs you, don't bear a grudge. We must forget completely what other people have done for us. Our ethos, our ethics, our sense of right and wrong is totally independent of what other people have done to us, how other people have behaved. And these two commandments, don't take revenge, don't bear a grudge, are summed up with perhaps the most famous quote from the Bible, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your neighbour as yourself. And yet that's not quite what it says, because there are two further Hebrew words in that quote which are often forgotten. Love your neighbour as yourself, I am God. Sometimes we think that the Torah is divided into mitzvot between man and those between man and God, the ones we call bein adam lamakom and bein adam lechavero. But in fact, there's no such distinction. As we see from this verse, even a mitzvah which is exclusively about our dealings with our fellow citizens, our fellow human beings, we keep that mitzvah because Ani Hashem, because I am God. By fulfilling the mitzvot bein adam lechavero, between man and his fellow, we are exactly at the same time fulfilling our requirements to God himself. There is no distinction between religious mitzvot and social mitzvot, just as there is no distinction between the physical world and the spiritual world. Our task is to realize that there is one world, and one world which we have the challenge, the opportunity, and the responsibility to fill with holiness. Shabbat Shalom.